but it's almost like a certain attributes that
Yeah.
makes people able to excel.
I agree, and I think I often have this debate with some friends, and I think it's a confidence that it gives you, and
Mm.
I think one of there's innate confidence that some people have, and that I think that originates from the families that they grow up with. Because if you grow up with parents who are very financially comfortable in an environment, that's great. You have confidence, you have comfort, you have confidence, but also if you spend your entire formative years in environments that are where you are just anything is possible. You are just told, right, we're going to play cricket today. We're going to go fly helicopters today. We're going to go, do this, do that, and also we're going to do the academics and everything else. You just grow up surrounded by all this, and you go through life with your head held high. And I think that is certainly one of the things that defined and has carried me forward in life. And I really attribute, in addition to obviously my mother's upbringing and my grandparents, my secondary school was that transformative thing for me because it gave me that confidence. It wasn't Durham. Durham was like, you go there, you study, whatever. It's a great institution, but it's that secondary school that I feel really did make that change for me. And also it's the network you have, as you pointed out. There is a club. If you go to Eton, you're probably not going to be sweeping the streets anytime soon.
Yeah.
Right? And because you have a network of people,
Yeah.
and sadly, life is that. Life is a network, whether it's it's micro networks or bigger networks, but that's kind of how it operates. And I think the sooner people learn that, and I feel that especially as a migrant, as an immigrant, and you go into a new environment, if you don't have that network, you don't appreciate it. You don't, things are harder than they ought to be. And whereas for indigenous people, locals, they kind of have those networks, whether they've inherited it or whatever. It's always accessible, and you don't necessarily notice that this is what has helped you, but it's just what you do. So I think that's probably one of the common denominators of people in leadership. It's the confidence and the network, because you get to a certain point where certain people, they haven't had to apply for a job. They don't go online. It's like, I'm out of work. You call your friend, I'm out of work. Can you let me know if something open? And it's done. And I think more people need to really appreciate that is what happens in life. Sort of banging your head against the wall, going, "Why aren't I progressing?" And I think I've often heard in your podcast that your network is your net worth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Against All Odds. My name is Daniel Koka, your accidental podcaster, and our guest this week in the studio is Mr. Patric Okumi. Patrick was born in Ghana and is currently a senior executive at a financial institution right here in the city of London. And he's also the co-founder of Adinkra London. So he's going to give us a bit more information about that. Patrick, you're welcome to Against the Odds.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Did I get the pronunciation of your name right? Okumi?
Yeah. I mean, it's I think technically it's Okumi, but I've become very anglicised in my enunciation, so Okumi works. Yeah,
That's
so
fine.
Thank you for checking.
Fantastic. Patrick, just tell our viewers a little bit about your background, just for context. How you came to be in England, maybe early experiences growing up, and just kind of how you managed to navigate your way into Durham, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So
Before this episode starts, I'd like to ask a big favour. Your subscription means a lot to us, because the bigger this platform gets, the bigger the guests get. So do me a favour, please click on the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. Now let's get back to this episode.
I guess to start off with, I was, as you said, I was born in Ghana. I was born in Takoradi, so that's obviously on the coast, and that's a bit of a port city. I moved, I guess, born in Takoradi, but I moved to Accra to live with my grandparents, and I stayed with them till I was about 5. So I guess that's kind of a little unusual to live with the grandparents. But my mum was born here, and she had me quite young. So I guess the
She's from
agreement.
Ghana as well.
Yeah, well, she's from Ghana, but
Ghana,
she was
okay.
born in the UK in
Okay.
Balham.
Right.
And the agreement, because she had me quite young, my grandparents were of the opinion that she'd be better off sort of resettling back in the UK, finishing university, and then when I was a bit older, I'd live with her.
Right.
So they brought me up in Accra, which is is an interesting. It was interesting looking back because it's a very different lifestyle, and as we know, Ghana, Accra, it's expansive. You've got big houses, big compounds, depending on how you grow up, and it's a very free childhood. I loved it. It was great. I've got so many memories of the animals and the compounds, and it was a great life. And when I was turning about 5, my biological father passed away, and I guess my grandparents thought I was ready to rejoin my mum, so came to the UK, and obviously that was a little different. It's like, you go from like super warm weather, super hot, everything, you've got status as a family, and you've got driver, you've got house help, and it's a very different lifestyle to come into the UK where you've got different stuff. Yeah, the reality hits home, and it's cold, it's miserable, but the beauty I had, I was fortunate I was young, so you kind of just you take on the chin and
Okay, so whereabouts in England did you grow up, and what was it? What were your experiences as person of color? And how did you adapt?
Yeah, sure. So when I think back to sort of, I guess, the early stages of my childhood in the UK, I grew up in South London, and a place called Sydenham actually, and Southeast London was kind of a bit more mixed demographically, so it wasn't like a majority Afro origin, black area, brown area, or white. It was a mixed hot pot, and I think I don't really, if I'm being brutally honest, I only remember certain aspects of it, but I think when I came, just to sort of, for your viewers to appreciate who I am and the childhood I had, I think I was asked how was the flight when I landed, and what did I eat on the plane, and I always joke with a lot of sincerity to people that English is not my first language. I may sound the way I sound, but it really isn't, because somebody asked me, what did you eat on the plane? And I tried my damn hardest to tell people what I ate. And you know what I said? I said I ate a rice in a thick African accent, because, I just didn't understand language. So there I was. So I'm a proper immigrant, and it's a lot of things were obviously very new. Suddenly imagine you grow up in a majority black country, and again, it's important to sort of address the stigma that Africa is all black or white, and our neighbours in Accra and Summit, I was best friends with the Lebanese family, and it's a very mixed area, but obviously it was majority black. But to go from that environment into the UK, if I'm being honest, I don't recall noticing any stark differences per se, but you just kind of it was only as I was getting older and probably heading towards sort of secondary school period that I started to appreciate the gravity of the societal of the challenges of being a migrant and immigrants, and those kind of political stories. I think as a kid you just don't really appreciate it. You don't think about it, and I think I don't mean to digress, but when we start thinking about the concepts of race and challenges and racism, I think that should help people appreciate that actually at that age as a kid, it isn't the first thing in the forefront of your mind. You're not looking at a person thinking you're a brown person, you're a black person, I feel that way about you. You just don't know any better. All you want to do is watch fun things, play and eat. That's kind of it. So I was fortunate that I didn't really appreciate those gravities at that age, but my mother sure as hell would have, and because she was growing up in a time where South London, there were all sorts of horrible things happening, and of course it's I'm not going to mention specific cases, but obviously there were stabbings of black people. There were the race, there weren't riots per se, but there were these horrendous, abhorrent acts that were carrying out, and to be a black single mother of a black boy, of course my mother must have had sleepless nights over worrying about sort of the path and journey and the world or the environment that I was obviously exposed to. So yeah, I think I was fortunate. I guess the benefit I had was I came from a very good family, and a family that had strong moral values. They were fairly accomplished, and I had that. I knew where I came from. I had proud heritage, and my mother was equally proud. She was very strong, and she also had a fantastic plan for me. And one of the things she always prioritized was, I want to give my children, I was the youngest child actually, but options in life, and education was at the very forefront. So unbeknown to me at the time, we had a very interesting dynamic where, if I'm being honest, it wasn't very huggy. Oh, how are you? Give me a hug, blah, blah, blah. She loved me. Of course she does, right? But it was very strict. It was very disciplined, and it's because she knew that she couldn't afford to mess up. So I was fortunate. I studied bloody hard. My mum bought every single Let's book under the guy. It was like that sort of environment where, and she was doing a crazy amount of stuff by herself. She was going through university, doing her undergrad. She did her masters, all while bringing me up. And making sure that, when it came to it, she was like, right, you're going to do the 11 plus. Didn't quite know what it was. It was just like a series of tests, just do them. I did them. And, these were for those who aren't aware, these kind of entrance exams to some of the, top institutions, secondary schools. And
So grammar school.
And independent schools typically, so private schools, grammar schools, but in the South London. So I did them for quite a few schools, and I think for quite a few of these schools I got the highest marks. And this is testament to just a case of like, if you are that young and you work hard, and these are the sort of results you can achieve. So I was very fortunate. I got into a school called Whitgift, which is in South Croydon.
Okay.
And I mean the website says sorry, but it's South Croydon, right? Don't let it fool you.
It sounds posh to say sorry.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny. Like I look back and it's it's a great school. It's an all boys school, and it's got peacocks walking around. It's got like wallabies.
Really? Okay.
And these are things I'd never seen before. And but it's a great school, and I was fortunate. I had all these different options of schools I could go to, and I chose Whitgift, or we chose Whitgift. I don't know why. I think we went to the open day, and my mum really liked the headmaster, and the fact that it was an environment that just felt conducive to producing well-rounded individuals. So, and I think when I reflect again, I feel that was kind of the turning point of my mum always being able to take a sigh of relief and breathe and just and be happy, because it was like she'd accomplished such a very a tough thing, because we grew up in a very tough environment, and I'm not going to profess that there were shootings and stabbings. None of that happened that I was aware of, but it was a very easy environment for me to sort of have access to the wrong crowds, and I didn't, and I feel a bit resentful a little bit, because I was I'm studying at home and I can hear kids playing, and I'm like, I want to be with them. But of course, that's kind of when you look back and you can appreciate that those could be grooming or feeding groups for gangs and things like that. But I never had to worry about that. So, got into a very good school. And
and then you went from there to Durham.
Yep.
What did you study in Durham, and how did that sort of lead you into a career in finance?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously Whitgift chapter happened, you do your A-levels, and it was one of those sort of feeder schools for the top universities, and I chose Durham largely because it was kind of the furthest from home, so I was just like, let's do that. I chose business finance because I thought I genuinely enjoyed business. I did business studies at school, and I was very entrepreneurial. I was the kind of kid in the back of physics, and I look back now and probably shouldn't have been doing this, should have been studying, but I'd come up with the idea for a novel, and I'd start writing a book, and then I would be like, this is cool, wouldn't it be cool to be a movie? So I learned 3D Studio Max 5 and animation, and I was like, look, let me make this movie and I could sell it, and of course that didn't happen, but I've always been very entrepreneurial. So did business finance with a view that I wanted to explore just the world of business and understand it better. And again, through university, I did various entrepreneurial things. Everyone runs a student events business, but I did that for a bit, and then somehow started blagging into a company that I could be a marketing company for their product. So I had students marketing, I can say it now, Mattison's refrigerators, which are like these little things. So all my mates were dishing them out and taking pictures. So I did a lot of fun things, but I guess after sort of year 2, I was kind of thinking, what do I really want to do? And I was like, you know what, I want to be a trader. Primarily because it seems cool, and that was kind of the narrative. It's a good job, it's cool, and and actually also it's because I had some experience, and through school I got to meet someone who's no longer with us, Derek Tullett, who started Tullett Prebon. He was an old boy of my school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, and I remember he came to talk about his career, and he drove up to the school in this red Ferrari with this super hot partner, and I was like, that's a cool dude. And he invited us to the trading floors, and we walked around and didn't know what was going on, but it seemed cool. So that kind of, I guess,
the energy of the trading floor.
Yeah, the energy, and it just seemed cool
to you, doesn't it?
Yeah. It was fun. It was like, this is cool. So that was kind of year 2. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a trader. I don't know what, but sounds all right. So that was kind of the plan.
And then you moved on from there. You joined a graduate scheme.
Yeah.
So just also a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think what's quite important to share is that certain things were very accessible because of the institutions that I was fortunate to be able to get into. And when you look back again, you can appreciate how that's not the same. So the beauty of a university like Durham was that it's, a lot of companies would come to the universities. They would recruit. They wanted Durham alumni. And when it came to careers, it's like, there was a lot of hand-holding and guidance, which is starting to become a thing for other universities. But I remember doing the milk round. You apply to all these universities, and, that's where I became very, I've always been conscious of privilege and educational privilege. And whilst as a black man, there are lots of privileges that aren't accessible, certain education helps, and the institution. So I had a lot of opportunities to apply to different institutions, apply to a few banks, and I got into a grad program, which is great. And it was great because it's nice to know that, okay, you're finishing this, you've got something, you can do something. So, it's one of the best grad programs I'd been, I knew about and got on. It was to join a bank that had been acquired by an Icelandic investment bank. So part of the program was to live out in Iceland and Reykjavik in 2007, which was pretty epic. It was like, hang on, you finish university, you're now on an extended holiday. You're getting paid for it, and so, and it was just such an extreme experience, right? Iceland. So I was there. It was a great program. Got to work within everything from corporate finance to investment banking to hedge funds to private banking in Mayfair and some of the posher sort of companies. And then what was a real turning point for me was someone who I consider a friend, enjoyed, liked my energy, and felt that I was a good fit for his business. And he used to run Citigroup's risk up prop trading globally, and he joined this bank that I worked for and asked if invited me to join him as his number 2, which is wacky because I'm this kid who's never seen a Bloomberg screen before, and suddenly here's a Bloomberg, and I joined him as a junior prop trader at 22. Which is insane because suddenly, I was probably overdrawn in my current account. And I remember, a small little book of it's small, right? But it's like $15 million of things you can buy and sell. And if you make money, great. If you lose money, not so great. But that was the turning point. He gave me, the shot. And his boss, who was also a good friend of his, signed it off. And again, he's somebody who was at my wedding and, I consider a dear friend. And, that was the turning point because... in 2008, there weren't many black men in the front office in London trading. Of course, there were some, of course, but in terms of
very few.
Yeah, very few. In capacities like market making, proprietary trading, it just didn't happen. So I was very, very fortunate, and that I attribute that good fortune to again my mother, the institutions that I worked within, which allowed me to, learn, get the academics, but also be around a person to appreciate and be able to navigate this environment. And yeah, that's kind of my journey.
Okay, so that leads into my next question, because it seems like a critical attribute to in your journey thus far was the ability to network and to connect with people, which probably came directly or indirectly from the kind of schools and educational establishments that you had found yourself in. Because people talk about sending their children to private schools like Eton, like Whitcliffe College, and other places like that, so that they can grow up in a certain ecosystem.
Yeah.
If you look at the people leading this country, they all went to. Yeah, they all went to certain schools, and not much seems to be said about it, but we need to say it as it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because those educational institutions, whilst they might not necessarily bring out the most academic people, they bring out people who are very well rounded.
Yeah.
And you see somebody who's been to one of these schools, has a graduate degree, and he's chairman of a bank.
Yeah.
Right. He doesn't have a master's.
Yeah.
He has a first degree in philosophy.
Yeah.
And history,
English,
and classics.
Yeah.
Right. But yet he's running a bank, with billions in assets.
Yeah.
Making millions.
Absolutely.
In wages. And it's hard to grasp, because how does somebody who did history or classics in Oxford,
what qualifies them to?
Yeah, or how does that qualify them to?
I agree.
To run a bank, but it's something else. It's I don't know how to describe it.
No, I agree.
But it's almost like a certain attributes that makes people able to excel.
I think I agree, and I think I often have this debate with some friends, and I think it's a confidence that it gives you, and I think one of there's this innate confidence that some people have, and that I think that originates from the families that they grow up with. Because if you grow up with parents who are very financially comfortable in an environment, that's great. You have confidence, you have comfort, you have confidence, but also if you spend your entire formative years in environments that are where you are just anything is possible, you are just told, right, we're going to play cricket today, we're going to go fly helicopters today, we're going to go do this, do that, and also we're going to do the academics and everything else. You just grow up surrounded by all this, and you go through life with your head held high. And I think that is certainly one of the things that defined and has carried me forward in life. And I really attribute, in addition to obviously my mother's upbringing and my grandparents, my secondary school was that transformative thing for me, because it gave me that confidence. It wasn't Durham. Durham was like, you go there, you study, whatever. It's a great institution, but it's that secondary school that I feel really did make that change for me. And also it's the network you have, as you pointed out. There is a club. If you go to Eton, you're probably not going to be sweeping the streets anytime soon.
Yeah.
And because you have a network of people, and sadly, life is that. Life is a network, whether it's it's micro networks or bigger networks, but that's kind of how it operates. And I think the sooner people learn that, and I feel that, especially as a migrant, as an immigrant, I need to figure out what the definition is between the two. But as a migrant, as an immigrant, when you go into a new environment, if you don't have that network, you don't appreciate it. You don't, things are harder than they ought to be. And whereas for Indigenous people, locals, they kind of have those networks, whether they've inherited it or whatever, it's always accessible. And you don't necessarily notice that this is what has helped you, but it's just what you do. So I think that's probably one of the common denominators of people in leadership. It's the confidence and the network, because you get to a certain point where certain people, they haven't had to apply for a job. They don't go online. It's like, I'm out of work. You call your friend, I'm out of work. Can you let me know if something open? And it's done. And I think more people need to really appreciate that is what happens in life. You're sort of banging your head against the wall, going, "Why aren't I progressing?" And I think I've often heard in your podcast that your network is your net worth. Right?
Absolutely. So then, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you did mention as well that you didn't really have people who looked like doing prop trading at 22. You said there were a few people, but it wasn't,
Yeah.
there wasn't that much of a representation, What do you think we can do to, for somebody who's watching this, who, um, probably wants to get into that environment, and is wondering how best to go about it. I'm not quite sure, but I get asked all the time about people who are in university and just want work experience. I know you've got a 10,000 black interns. There's various initiatives that are in operation now to try to give people who are underrepresented
Yeah.
some kind of a foot through the door.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure it's enough, because there's still people who are outside that 10,000 black interns network, and who are just looking for an opportunity. That's
Yeah.
all they're looking for. They're hungry, they're reasonably capable,
Yeah.
but they probably might not have had the chance of sterling, grammar school education or private education or whatever it is, and the odds are stacked against them.
Massively so. Yeah.
Is there hope for such people?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, of course, yes. And without hope, what's the point, right? But you are quite right that the odds are stacked against certain communities. I think quite brutally, I often have to ask people, do you really want to get into banking and trading? If I'd gone into recruitment when I finished university and worked out in Dubai, I'd be retired now. But look, let's just focus on an environment that you and I are familiar with, which is it's the financial markets in particular. Yeah. And you're right. Historically, I think 5 years ago, you'd be putting your hair out frustrated because there are so many incredibly talented people who just don't get that opportunity. But we also need to realise and be appreciative of the fact that in the front office, there are only so many seats in the front office. And historically, the painful thing is, going back to our earlier point, it's about the network. And more often than not, historically, these jobs were already pre-allocated, and that's the sad thing. So, before you finish your exam, that job that you're going to apply for, someone's already, obviously it doesn't always work like that. But, what I'm so grateful for is that there are groups like, when I was, at university, there was SEO London, there's 10,000 black interns. And, I now work in an institution, which is, it's a super old trading house. But I've noticed in the last 3 years, a concerted effort to introduce more inclusivity, and it's so important. And it's not something that you just hope that more people just apply. You have to be proactive. You have to start opening the doors to other universities. It's not just the Russell Group. It's not just the Oxbridge or these institutions need to appreciate that you can't just be linear in your thinking, because all you do is you will bring in the same people. It's like it's statistics, right? It's risk. It's you can't just have the same of more of the same, because that's not a diversified portfolio. If we bring it into financial markets terminology, you need to bring in various different sexes, different ethnicities, different religions, because you bring different perspective, right? And that's what allows firms to survive, to thrive, and generally just do better. And if we want to bring it down to financial terms, be more profitable. There have been so many studies that showcase and communicate that a diverse firm actually is more profitable. So I think, to bring this back to the question, what do we do? These financial houses need to really not sort of just get sucked into the Bill Ackman anti-DEI rationale logic and actually embrace it, because the institutions are the way they are because of exclusionary behaviour. Back in the day, you could not work in the City of London if you weren't upper echelon society. You didn't go to
speak in a certain way.
Yeah, speak in a certain way, be married to certain people. Like you had to be upper class. You had to belong, and that was what it was. If you were super bright and middle class, you didn't stand a hope in hell. But slowly that sort of thawed, and people become inclusive to be smart and go to a good university. Now we need to say be smart, and you don't necessarily have gone to a good university, because I often joke with my colleagues, and And I'm just like, if I had to apply for a grad scheme today, I would be screwed, because right now you've got candidates who apply, and they can be from all over the world. They could be from India. They're 21 and they started coding Python and R and low latency stuff age 13. And I'm just like, I think I just learned how to tie my shoelaces at that point. And they've saved up £100 and they've invested in these funds. And whilst they haven't turned it into £1 billion, the approach that they've taken, the rationale, the logic of how they choose assets, they manage portfolios, risk, it's way better than what people do today. So, we need to be less discriminatory in how we screen candidates and actually celebrate diversity of experience. And I think I see that sometimes some banks actually, they welcome not second, but people looking for a career change. It could have been that you're very senior in a food business, but the learnings that you get from being in industry, it's so valuable. Now, I remember towards the end of 2007, 2010, everyone did an MBA, and suddenly you've got all these applicants with MBAs, and I'm not throwing shade on MBAs, but there is something to be said about people who have real world experience, who've navigated how to build a business from scratch, get it to X recurring revenue, had to worry about marketing, had to pivot. Reading and studying that doesn't
give you that.
I could read a guide on how to fly a plane, but put me in a cockpit and I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work out. So we need to actually show a concerted effort and try harder, basically. Yes. Okay. So there is hope.
Fantastic. Moving swiftly on, you also happen to be co-founder of Adinkra London, which is a brand that I've started to love greatly. And just tell us a little bit about, that venture. And, I see you brought some products as well to show our guests.
Talk about Adinkra. Okay, so look, I'm an Adinkra man. I love it, as you can see here. Something I threw on. I didn't even know I was coming on today. So the genesis story behind Adinkra, the reason why we started it is because I think it's great because you now know a little bit more about my background. So I'm a child of Ghana. I'm a child of Africa, but I grew up in the West. I grew up in the UK, and I was fortunate to have a very rich experience. I've got a rich network of friends, all over the world. And growing up in a very Eurocentric environment, whether one likes it or not, you start absorbing some of the prevailing cultures and narratives and experiences. You are a product of your environment. If you were born and grew up in China, you would have certain mannerisms. If you grew up in Germany, you'd have certain indigenous. You'd be stereotyping, but you'd be very efficient. And conversely, if someone grew up in a tropical country, they would have a different demeanor about life. But anyway, so growing up in a very Western Eurocentric environment, going to these schools I went to, universities I went to, and the environment I worked in, and what became quite acute was that there's a very the dominance of the prevailing narrative of effectively Western supremacy, Western European supremacy, and whether it's intentional or not, at the expense of other nations. And we've got to not, I'm going to be very candid. So growing up, that's kind of the upbringing I had, the environment, professional environment I've grown within, and focusing on something in particular, fashion. If you were to walk down the road and ask somebody, it could be anyone from anywhere in the world, just name five luxury premium fashion brands. They're not going to struggle to name 5 top European brands. You could be in Indonesia and do that same thing, and they'll be screaming Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior. That's it, right? You could be anywhere in the world. And for me, I'm in my 30s now, and I'm reflecting, and I'm sort of thinking, why is that? And is that because you can't get premium clothing or premium brands anywhere else in the world? And this is something that didn't sit well with me. And again, being super entrepreneurial, I was speaking to my cousin, and I was like, let's do something about this. So we'd worked together on another tech venture. We winding that down, exiting, and then we wanted to work together. And it coincided with a time when I was looking for a tie for my birthday. My wife and I, we were looking, and she was naturally, instinctively, it was like, you want a nice tie. Well, do you want a Hermes tie? It's just what you do, or Ferragamo or wherever. And I was looking at the patterns, and I was like, I like the colours, but this has got like golf clubs on. I don't play golf. This has got a sailing boat on. I don't have a sailing boat. And you look in and you see this pattern, which is like the fleur de lis, and then you've got paisley, and so it's all the same stuff. And I was just like, you go onto any other website, it's the same stuff, and you're talking about £175 for a tie that looks the same as a 50 quid TM Lewin tie, and blah blah blah. And I just said, you know what, I feel like we've run in the West, they've run out of patterns, they've run out of designs, and they're just rehashing stuff and living off the I guess the provenance of the founder story 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And I was like, look, how difficult would it be to actually create a tie that has the same sort of composition, the premium sort of feel, the fabrics, the construction as any of the leading ties, but actually have patterns or designs that actually resonated with me. And resonated with me as being a child of Africa, but also growing up in the West, and some had meaning. And I said, look, in Ghana, the symbols, the Adinkra symbols, which are symbols that tell stories, they're patterns. It could be like a pattern that's like it looks like a cross, that means quality and excellence, or two heads are better than one, with very sort of profound meanings. So I was like, why don't we create a product that has these patterns on, which for African diaspora, it's like they can wear and have a connection, may have more of an affinity with certain products than golf clubs. And I know you're a big golfer, so you're just thinking, what you want about, give me a golf club tie any day. But I was like, for me, it was kind of like, I can wear clothing with me that resonated from the continent. But also, on the flip side, for non-African diaspora, is a way to actually access just whole new clothing, new patterns, new designs. And if you want to dig a bit deeper, actually engage in a brand that looks to showcase African culture in a way that just hasn't been done before, because we've grown up in the West with the prevailing narrative, which has been reinforced through Red Nose Day, where you see the poor African child, begging bowl, please, and everyone's like, oh, look at that, we need to do something, let's give them £1 because that will help, without truly addressing why that's going on, and realizing that actually we're continuously pushing images of poverty and indebtedness and all the horrible stuff, which just allows us to feel like, what, life's tough, but it's not as bad as that, without actually looking at the other side of the picture of, oh, hang on a second, all the chocolate that we eat, that we say Swiss chocolate's the best, Belgian chocolate, oh, where does it come from? Oh, it comes from Ghana. Oh, we're not taught to think that way. We're not taught to think, oh, I've got the latest mobile phone. Could that mobile phone exist if it wasn't for exporting all the nickel or this electric cars? Where does it come from? We in the West, it's a very, it's become very convenient to promote certain narratives at the expense of others. So we've grown up thinking if it's African, it's inferior, meaning that African culture, African design, African attire rarely enters the mainstream, rarely enters the world of conversation. And I knew we did something right when my first boss, who is a dear friend of mine, diehard Hermes fan, saw one of our products. We did a Kickstarter, which was the Insa hand finished silk tie, which is our first tie. We did the Kickstarter, and he loved it. He bought one, and today he's bought every single tie we've made, and wears it. He wears it on whenever it's on Bloomberg, CNBC, like any TV. He's wearing it with pride. Okay. And had I asked him when I joined 2008, I'm going to buy you an African tie, he probably would have said, it's cute, but perhaps not. And I would have respected that, because up until that, up until we were doing it, we'd become, in terms of African culture or African design in the West, it was very hobbyist. It was very auntie is sewing this in her council flat, and we haven't invested. There's certain, the packaging wasn't on point. It was, so unfortunately it just never crossed that chasm from and could be taken seriously. So we were like, let's create a brand that would showcase African culture and premium way, and would basically sit in between a Ralph Lauren and Hermes, and would be a beacon of pride for the African diaspora, but for non-Africans, it would be a means of accessing new designs, new cultures, and if you're really that invested in a way to engage with the brand, where you don't feel that actually people are going to see me wearing it and feel that I'm appropriating, or versus the appreciation versus appropriation debate, but it's a way to learn more, and that's kind of what we said we would do, and that was probably it's about 3 years ago.
Fantastic. So do you want to just show some of your Adinkra products?
Sure. So we started out with this, which is the Insar hand finished silk tie, and what's quite interesting about it is, if you look at the pattern here, it's actually a little cross, which basically originates from Ghana, and it means quality and excellence. So that's the symbol. Okay. And on the rear, on the rear, we also incorporate Ankara fabric tipping, which is kind of the trad cloth that people instinctively associate with African design, African culture. And this is the label, Adinkra London, hand finished, African heritage proudly stitched on there. So when we launched this, our flagship tie, there were no compromises. This is the finer silk, which was flown in, printed in Macclesfield, Manchester, and then shipped to Tunbridge Wells, where a good friend of mine has a workshop where the family, I think they've made ties and silk products for about 150 years, makes it there. So it's hand finished, and the packaging is on point. We've got very rich boxes that have Adinkra London African heritage and bow detail. And to date we've produced hand finished silk ties. We a bit of a little showcase here. Yeah. We have the swim shorts.
Have the socks.
You have the socks. We've got the swim shorts.
Oh wow!
Yeah, you haven't seen these.
I haven't seen these.
Yeah.
No.
So again, it's a pattern.
This is amazing.
We've got the tipping, which has Adinkra London there. Okay. African heritage, and then the rear, so that when the ladies are admiring, they can see it's Adinkra African heritage here. Yeah.
Very good quality as well.
It's everything, just no compromise, and and it's the same sort of the formula that we've been applying. We make ladies scrunchies, for the hair.
Yeah, all right, okay.
Probably not right for you.
Not right for me.
As you can see here, game.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, and obviously I'm wearing the t-shirts, and there's some prototype products, including this little treacle.
Oh wow!
Which is what looks like a very
very plush golf cap.
Yeah, golf cap, or just an everyday cap.
Yeah.
And it's everything we do is very understated excellence. So here we've got the Adinkra London on the back, but we've got our custom pattern the rear, and then also the lining has the design. So we produce everything from swim shorts, t-shirts, lady scrunchies, twillies, socks. Been super popular, and it's very much a labor of love. But what we're also looking to do is, it's not just about making clothes, it's not just the fashion, it's about what the brand represents. And I mean, if I may, I can expand upon this. We, Adinkra is a platform. We operate something called the Friends of Adinkra campaign, which is an initiative which allows and provides a platform for members of the diaspora to basically talk about their experiences, talk about the importance of promoting positive narratives about the African continent, and attributing stories to the origin stories, and just being ambassadors of Africa. So we have individuals from the African diaspora, and also individuals outside the diaspora who sit with me. We chat, we talk about things, we talk about stereotypes and the damage that's been done. And we just have true stories, and we're not afraid. We talk about things. It could be some of the most amazing manor houses in England. We can still enjoy them, but it's important to know how these were financed. So we have these dark conversations. We talk about inequality in the workplace. We talk about profiling, stereotyping, and and we've been lucky. Very fortunate. We've connected with so many fantastic people. Ranging from Nigel Reo-Coker. I'm not a football fan at all, but I've become one now. Now that he's a friend of Adinkra. We were introduced to Hollywood actor Toby Kebbell, who's not Afro origin, but he's been in incredible movies. And sat down and we just had a candid conversation. And he took the time because it's important. And then we had Ryan Answer and David Olusoga. So it's been great. And yeah, we're keeping on pushing.
Great. So where can people get the Adinkra London products?
Yeah, sure. So we're predominantly online only. So you just head onto the website, adinkralondon.com, and the products are there. We're on Instagram. But yeah, every now and again we do pop-ups. So we've been in New Bond Street, we've been in St. Paul's, we've been in outside Piccadilly, Regent Street. So yeah, we every now and again we do a pop-up. So it's
Good. Great. What do you think of this podcast and what we're trying to do?
I think it's so important because I think, yeah, we're in an age where there are a lot of podcasts that do crop up, and sometimes they are, each one has its own merits. Sometimes they're just talk shows for boys to talk about girls and girls to talk about boys. But I think what you're doing is super important because it provides a platform for individuals from the African diaspora who are. I guess it could be global, but predominantly in the West, who look like you've got darker skin, whether you're mixed race or whatever, but individuals from the African continent who are, we need to appreciate that people who come, they know the direction of travel, they're kind of getting confidence and they know where they're going in life. But for the younger generation who might be, at home trying to figure out what they do in life, talking about wanting to be an engineer, or they want to be a trader, or they want to be a fashion designer, but feeling that they're in a community that's not a serious job. It's not what you do. You've got to be a doctor or a dentist. It's important to listen to these stories, and not that any of us know exactly what we're doing in life, but know that the path from A to B isn't necessarily a straight line. There are lots of different steps, and
lots of different paths.
I wear different hats, right? There are times when I'm the fashion designer, but it's not because I came on, we designed a pair of socks that's made us millionaires. No, we have to finance this through our day jobs. So don't give up your passions. Keep on at it, but realize there are multiple ways to get to that journey.
Fantastic. Patrick, we have a tradition of this podcast where we give our guests the opportunity to dedicate the episodes they feature on to anyone or any group of people of their choices. So who would you like to dedicate this episode to? And you can look into the camera for that.
Wow, okay. That's a big question. You kind of, in fairness, I was aware you may have thrown that out. So I would dedicate this podcast and what we're doing to actually the community. When we're talking about Adinkra London, our motivation is the community. It's about the individuals from the African diaspora, whatever they're doing, wherever they are. We are building a brand that ultimately has the African diaspora at its core, at center, and also non-African diaspora. But we want to make sure that we do justice for the continent and the 54 countries. So yes, I dedicate this to the community.
Great. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd like you to click on the like button, share, comment and subscribe to help us to grow this platform, because the bigger the platform gets, the easier it will be to bring you stories like Patric's, where he's gone from the trading floor into fashion. So Patric, thank you very much for making this happen.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
See you next week.